Okay, great. Thank you very much, Ronnie. Good morning to everyone out there, and this is a full session. Right now I'm showing 360 attendees, and I'm impressed with your interest in this area. Well, welcome to the workshop, and what you're seeing is the front page of a PowerPoint that I've structured to be a takeaway resource. So you can listen to me today without having to take notes. So I highly recommend you put your pen down, your paper on the side, put your feet up, and just listen. As Ronnie said, I will be taking questions at the very end of the session. And let me just tell you a little bit of disclosure. This is not a Big Brother thing, but I'm looking at this software, and it can tell me who is watching the PowerPoint and who is surfing, because there's a clear icon that shows up. I'm not going to mention names, but Chris, I can tell you we're doing something else. So sometimes I think SPO will use this data to determine whether and to what extent someone should get credit for attending this session if they haven't been paying close attention to this workshop. I just urge you to put everything aside, just listen to the workshop. I'm going to get you out of here in 30 minutes, okay? So with that, why don't we go ahead and get started? All right, what's the purpose of this workshop? And hold on one second. Ronnie, I'm having a problem with the computer. It's not advancing. Oh, there we go. Got it. Okay, objective is to provide you, the procurement professionals, with basic training on detecting and preventing certain economic crimes. And I want to emphasize that we're only talking about basic training, nothing more. So you might be wondering, why are we doing this? Why are we focusing on procurement professionals? Well, the short answer is that you play a critical role in the award and distribution of a very valuable asset, namely the tax dollars. And because of your role, you can help us to prevent and detect these economic crimes, as well as assist in the investigation and prosecution of these economic crimes. All right, I know you're not blind, so you can see that I'm emphasizing economic crimes, because that's exactly what we're talking about. Crimes. Bid rigging, price fixing, and market allocation are economic crimes that are subject to stiff penalties and even jail sentences. And so you're wondering, how stiff are the penalties? Well, I have a slide. For a federal prosecution, a corporation can be fined up to $100 million and possibly more, such as twice the gain derived or twice the loss suffered by the victims. A person can be fined up to $1 million and face up to 10 years in prison. For state prosecution, the fine is up to $1 million for a corporation, and a person can be fined up to $100,000 and up to 3 years in prison. Okay, I see you scrunching your face, and you're wondering, do they really fine corporations $100 million? Well, the answer is yes. The largest single fine ever imposed by the USDOJ was $500 million. And the lucky recipient was Hoffman LaRoche for its leadership role in the international vitamin cartel. The largest collective fine was $1.6 billion, and that was imposed by the USDOJ for its prosecution of price-fixing conspiracies in the air cargo transportation industry. So you might be saying, well, these are corporations. Do they really go after individuals? And the short answer is yes. This slide shows 3 examples of fairly recent USDOJ activities involving persons. In the first example, the former president of a shipping company was sentenced to 60 months in jail for his role in a price-fixing conspiracy. In the second example, an executive of an LCD producer was sentenced to 24 months and forced to pay a $50,000 fine because of a price-fixing conspiracy. In the third example, 3 former GE executives engaged in bid rigging and were forced to spend at least 24 months in prison. And it can get worse. Here are 2 examples of where the DOJ charged individuals with not only bid rigging, but mail fraud. And so you can see that the effect of adding the mail fraud charge is more fines and more jail time. So you might be wondering, what are these laws that can impose these stiff penalties? Well, we're talking about the antitrust laws. And these are laws that are there to protect competition and encourage competition. Why? Why do we want to protect and encourage competition? Well, because competition provides benefits that are deemed to be desirable to society, such as lower prices, lower supply costs, innovation, better information. The antitrust laws consist of two tiers. We have the federal tier, and I've listed the Sherman Act, the Clayton Act, and the FTC Act. And of course, we have the Hawaii counterpart that's found in Hawaii Revised Statutes, Chapter 480. Now, for today's presentation, we're really focusing on Section 1 of the Sherman Act and its Hawaii counterpart, and you can see the salient language on this slide. Now, I put the language up there just to illustrate the application of the laws. The Sherman Act applies to interstate commerce, or commerce among the several states or with foreign nations. In contrast, the Hawaii law applies to intrastate commerce. Okay? Now, that's all I'm going to do about the statute, because we don't want to dwell on the language, but really want to get to the gist of these laws. The gist of these laws is that they prohibit collusive agreements. Bid rigging, price fixing, and market allocation are collusive agreements because, number one, they involve agreements among competitors, and number two, they are unreasonable restraints of trade. So, what do we need to show a violation? Two things. We need an agreement and an unreasonable restraint of trade. Sounds simple, but what is an agreement? Well, generally speaking, it's a meeting of the minds. It's an understanding reached between two or more unrelated persons. But keep in mind that people don't put down in writing, we hereby agree to fix prices for the next 5 years by increasing our prices by 10% every month. You don't find that. So what you're going to have to do is look at the circumstances, such as the conduct, communications, and economic data, and things of that sort. So here's an example to ponder. Let's say there are 5 of us in a room, and we all sell widgets. And one person says, we should all increase our prices by $10 starting tomorrow morning. And no one else says a word. Tomorrow comes, and all of us have increased our prices by $10. Is there an agreement? I'm going to leave that one to you to ponder. Let's move on to restraints of trade. The first point to understand is that trade is often restrained legally. Take the example when you issue an RFP with the objective to find a particular vendor to provide a good or service. After going through the evaluation, you decide that this is the best bidder, the low winning bidder. You get into a contract, and that bidder will be the sole source of your good or service. Has trade been restrained? Certainly, because you can't go out and buy the good or service from someone else. Our concern is not with that type of restraint of trade. It's with an unreasonable restraint of trade, which is where the free play of competition has been unlawfully interfered with by collusion. Okay, with that brief overview, let's dive in and take a look at some types of collusive arrangements. First, let's talk about bid rigging. Let me lay out the context. You got a bid solicitation by the agency, and what you have is the bidders agreeing in advance who's going to be the winner. What's the harm? It's the elimination of competition. All right, now how can bid rigging occur? Well, there are 3 basic forms of bid rigging: bid rotation, bid suppression, and complementary bidding. Let's talk first about bid rotation. Bid rotation is exactly what it sounds like, where the bidders or competitors are rotating and taking turns on who will be the winning bidder. And this rotation can take place on the basis of time, product, or geographic area. Here's an example of bid rotation by year. Take a look at the right side of the screen, and for the year 2000, bidder 1 is a losing bidder, bidder 2 is a winning bidder. Does it look like there's a problem? No, all looks fine. However, when you go back and look at the time spectrum from 2010 to 2012, now you start to see a pattern of conduct where the bidders are rotating on who's going to be the winner. So bid rotation is one of those situations where you need to see prior years and have an understanding of the history of the bidding patterns in order to find out whether there was a violation going on. Here's an example of bid rotation by the product. You've got 2 products and 2 bidders. 2013, bidder 1 wins the right to provide product A, and bidder 2 wins the right to provide product B. Doesn't look to be a problem. Go back a year, and now you see a situation that's reversed of 2013. Now this is a little more complex because you've got two factors at play, time and different products. Okay, and here's an example of bid rotation by geographic area. You've got two bidders and two markets, Oahu and the neighbor islands. 2013, bidder 1 has Oahu, bidder 2 has the neighbor islands. Go back a year and you find it's the reverse situation. Okay, so that's an overview of bid rigging called bid rotation on the basis of time, product, and geographic area. Now let's look at bid rigging in the form of bid suppression. And the key word here is suppression. We're talking about a bid that has been suppressed or eliminated. So here's a scenario. You've issued your RFP, you know there are at least 3 qualified bidders out there, and lo and behold, only 1 submits a bid. And there's no logical reason for the others not bidding. Okay, here's an example of bid rigging in the form of complementary bidding. And this is basically a situation where a bidder agrees to bid high to foster another vendor to be the low winning bidder. So here's an example. You've got an RFP, you've got at least 3 qualified bidders out there, and lo and behold, you've got 2 very high bids and 1 low bid. That's the winner. All right, let's move on now to the second economic crime called price fixing. What is it? It's an agreement among competitors that affects the price or the terms of sale for a product or service. Clearly, the easiest example is where all these competitors agree on prices. But price fixing does not have to always involve an agreement on prices. It could involve an agreement on terms or variables that affect prices, such as the profit margin, discounts, pricing formula, credit terms, pricing differentials. Now let's pause here for a moment. Think about this. Every company sets its own prices. Every company has pricing differentials. It has pricing formulas. It has discount policies. It has credit terms. Is that a problem? Absolutely not. A company can certainly do that. The problem here is that we're talking not about a specific company, but a group of companies who compete against each other, agreeing among themselves about prices and pricing terms. So what's the problem? Well, the problem is they deprive the market of competition. That's the harm. Now, one of the more famous price-fixing conspiracies was the lysine conspiracy. Lysine is a feed additive used for livestock to increase the quality and availability of protein in the diet of the livestock. Now, this conspiracy involved Japanese and Korean suppliers and one major U.S. company, Archer Daniels Midland. And what these companies did was they agreed to divide the worldwide market and fix the price of lysine down to the penny. The significance of this case is that there was an informant, and the FBI and DOJ were able to actually record price-fixing meetings, and the island of Maui played a critical role. What happened was there was a cartel meeting held on Maui, at which time they conducted their price-fixing meetings and arrived at the agreement. So here's the backdrop. You had an informant working for the U.S. company, and he reported the conspiracy to the FBI. Well, the FBI and DOJ wanted tapes of the meetings, but to get the tapes, the meeting had to be held in the United States because Japan law prohibited secret taping. So the trick used to get the conspirators to the U.S. was the offer of golf on Maui. And what happened was the conspirators created a bogus trade association meeting at the hotel as a cover. They even created bogus minutes of the trade meetings, but they were holding these side price-fixing meetings in the hotel room. This was so compelling that there was a movie made on the conspiracy starring Matt Damon. I'm not sure if it was a blockbuster, but it was a movie. If anyone is interested, I do have the DVD, and you're welcome to contact me to see the movie. Okay, we've talked about bid rigging and price fixing. Let's move on to the third economic crime, market allocation. What is it? It's an agreement among competitors to divide the market among themselves in some form or fashion. on the basis of perhaps by customers, territories, or products. And the harm is, yes, in the 8th row, you're right. You deprive the market of competition. Okay, you get the $25 Starbucks gift certificate. Okay, let's talk about market allocation by customer. In this example, for 3 years, you have bidders A, B, and C bidding on all government projects, federal, state, and county. But then in 2012 and repeated in 2013, you find that you're getting only sole bidders. A is limiting itself to federal project, and it's the only bidder. B is focusing on state projects as a sole bidder, and C is focusing on county projects as a sole bidder. And there's no logical reason, such as a reduction in operations, or a vendor being disqualified on federal projects, or a vendor being disqualified or failing to meet licensing requirements in accordance with state law. Okay. Here's an example that might suggest market allocation by territory. From 2007 to 2012, you've got 2 bidders bidding for work on all the islands. Then you come to 2013, and you're finding that you don't have competitive bids. All you have is a sole bid by A for work on Oahu and Hawaii, and B for work on Maui and Kauai. And there's no logical explanation, such as a shift in the base yard location, or downsizing, or some other economic factor. Here's an example of possible market allocation by product. For years, you have A and B both competing and submitting bids to provide office supplies and copier paper to the government. Come 2013, you're finding that they're specializing. You have 1 bidder just for office supplies and 1 bidder just for paper. All right, so where are we? Well, we've talked about 3 economic crimes. Let's briefly turn the corner and talk about conditions that might foster collusion. Are there such conditions? Yep. There are some situations that could create opportunities for competitors to collude, or just make it easier for them to collude. As an example, you've got a market with few sellers and bidders. It allows for easier coordination of conspiracies. You've got a standardized product where the key variables are price and quantity and not product differentiation or quality. It's a lot easier to arrive at an agreement. Repeated sales. Now you have a recurring event, and that fosters the potential for bid rotation. Or where you have bidders with an opportunity to meet, such as a trade convention or a trade association meeting, or being able to mill around a bid opening because the bid submission and the bid opening all takes place at the same place and time. Okay? These provide cover for competitors to get together and talk. Okay. We're going to transition. You've actually gone through 2/3 of the presentation. We're going into the last third. We're going to talk about red flags now and what you can do. So I really need your attention. Okay. Let me start off by saying red flags are not violations. Red flags are just an indication that there's something unusual going on, and you ought to ask questions or report the matter to someone. I categorize red flags as either immediate or pattern. Let's first talk about immediate red flags. You could have a red flag that's generated by identical syntax or spelling errors. Here's an example. These are 2 bid letters supposedly submitted by 2 bidders on a particular Guam Public Works project. If you look at it, you've got different letterhead, you've got a different signature, different name of the signer, even the first paragraph is different. But I have highlighted certain text for a reason. Both letters have the same syntax error. Please give us a call, us, if you have any question. Now, an audit official saw this and alerted the FBI and DOJ, and lo and behold, after an investigation, it culminated with a Guam public official being convicted of bid rigging and having to serve, I believe, 7 years in jail. You can also find immediate red flags in the form of identical terms in what should be competing bids, like the postmark, return addresses, telephone numbers, fax numbers, calculations, stationery, handwriting, email addresses, or maybe even the metadata for the electronic bids. We had a situation where we received a complaint because the sign-in sheet for the bid drop-off showed two competing bidders with identical fax numbers. You could also see things like whiteouts or other indication of a possible last-minute change, or a bidder requesting a bid package for a competitor, or a bidder submitting a bid when you know, as a procurement professional, this bidder just cannot do the job, either because he lacked expertise, equipment, labor, or even resources. Or if you see someone milling around at a bid submission site with multiple bid packages and kind of furtively looking around to see who's showing up. You could have a situation where there's a successful bidder whose subcontracts work to competitors that submitted unsuccessful bids. Now, it could be simply nothing, or it could be that there's a complementary bid situation going on. Or worse yet, you've got a company that won the bid, the RFP, and then withdraws its RFP, and then subsequently gets involved via a subcontract from the second winning contractor. Or if you're looking at the bid responses and you're saying, hey, they're increasing the prices, and I'm not aware of any basis for increased costs generating increased prices or other known or documented reason. Or if you find that the bids you're receiving are well over cost estimates that you prepared. Now, that latter situation was involved in a federal tunnel construction case. This is a pretty big project, and what the procurement professionals did was they had a detailed engineering cost estimate prepared that was expanded just a bit to cover any last-minute unknown contingencies. There are 4 bidders out there. They submitted the bids, and lo and behold, all bids came in higher than the cost estimate. This troubled the procurement professionals, so they launched an investigation, and it turned out there was a complementary bidding and a kickback scheme in place. Flatiron, the winning bidder, had agreed to give the kickbacks to Korn Construction and Peter Kiewit for their participation in this scheme. And to reward Asphalt Paving, Asphalt got a subcontract. You could also find immediate red flags through statements being made by people when they refer to the industry pricing or association pricing. We're not talking about an MSRP. We're talking about the industry itself having a particular price. Or someone being disgruntled and perhaps saying, hey, we're supposed to win this RFP, or we're supposed to be the lowest bidder. Or someone referring to their bid as a courtesy, a token, a cover, or a complimentary bid. Or someone using the royal we when referring to the industry. Okay, these are just examples of immediate red flags. I'm sure there are more, but these are just some basic examples of immediate red flags. All right, let's move on to pattern red flags. These are red flags that emanate from patterns and require a little bit of historical knowledge of the prior bidding history. Patterns such as the same suppliers bid and appear to take turns on who is going to be the winning bidder. Or you find that the same bidder always wins a particular procurement. Or you're seeing that cable companies out there consistently don't bid or consistently submit very high bids. You can see bids that are much higher than prior bids. Or a reduced number of competitors submitting bids in comparison to past RFPs, and there's no justification like workload, bankruptcy, exiting the market. Or you find that a bidder submits a very high bid on one RFP than on another RFP for the same product or service, and there's no cost differences to account for the higher bid. You could see a change in the pricing patterns. Like you might be signing identical prices when past prices were consistently different, or you see a change in the terms of the prices, such as discounts being eliminated, whereas it might have been standard in the past. Or you see a company that was very aggressive all of a sudden becoming very passive. And, well, the passive in the sense of not competing on price and submitting very high prices, or even worse yet, refusing to provide a quote. Or you've got a company that used to always sell and bid. All of a sudden they're saying we're not going to bid, and they start to refer you to a competitor. Okay, you're getting very close to the end. And So what can you do? Well, know the market. Become familiar with the market in which you make your purchases. And from time to time, look over the bidding history. Become familiar with some of the red flags that I've laid out in the prior slides. And certainly retain all bid documents, sign-in sheets, the bids, the envelopes, fax transmittal sheets, even email transmittals. To the extent possible, expand your bidder list. Now, having said that, I realize we're in a very small market, and a lot of times you're already facing just a handful of bidders. But, keep your eye out there in the market. There might be someone who's entering the market or is capable of doing the work, and perhaps they don't know about your RFP. Give them a call. Encourage them to consider becoming a bidder, or find out why they're not bidding. Okay. When the bids come in, date and timestamp the bids, and try and set the bid public opening at least one day after the specified due date so that you don't provide cover for these bidders. You can require the bidders to submit a certificate of independent price determination, and that's a certificate saying that they arrived at their prices independently and not through collusion. If they submit a certificate and it turns out that they did indeed collude, that's an unsworn falsification to authorities, and that's a misdemeanor penalty under state law. And if you start to see things that just don't make sense, pressure vendors to explain and justify their prices. Basically, really trust and use your spidey senses. And you don't have to make out a case. If you suspect there's something going on, give me a call as soon as possible. And if for some reason you feel uncomfortable calling me, then you can call my colleague over at the U.S. Department of Justice in San Francisco. I can assure you that whoever you call, your identity and the substance of your call will be held in confidence. So here's the contact information for me and from my counterpart in San Francisco. I want to thank you very much for your attention, and that is the end of the program.
Okay, we will address the questions at this time. Rod?
Yes, okay.
Okay, so the first question is, if agency, if they have one, can you hear me?
Yeah, by Ron Rawls.
Okay.
Okay, you're asking that if you've got a state agency that establishes requirements in a professional service solicitation so that one firm is 99% assured of being selected, would this be potentially a problem? And the answer is it could, if they have gamed the process in a way to slant the whole outcome to a particular person. And if there's no justifiable reason for the way they've structured their the specifics on the procurement, then it could be a problem. We have seen that occur in some instances because, let's say in a building contract, sometimes you have a consulting architect and he or she might be lazy, so they rely upon someone in the industry to draft the specs, and lo and behold, they draft the specs that slants it in favor of a particular vendor. So we've had to go in there and talk to them about, changing the specs to make it a little bit more generalized in nature. Okay, hold on one second. I'm having a little difficulty getting the questions here. As procurement professionals, how are we in violation of bid rigging if it's bidders that are doing the illegal activity? I didn't say that you would be in a problem, facing a problem. It's really the bidders themselves, unless there was complicity on the part of the procurement official. Next question was, hold on, we've got quite a number of questions. This is great. What if you're told to use only one place or departments grumble why you use another vendor? I'm not following that question, so I'm going to suggest that you give me a call, and we can talk about that. You also asked a question about how long does an investigation take. It really depends on the nature of the problem and how involved it is. So by all means, start it off immediately by giving us a call. Okay, someone did not understand the red flag about the syntax error. Well, the point is there was the same syntax error in both letters. And that's what clued off the public official that, hey, there's something strange here. You wouldn't see the identical syntax error, the inclusion of the extra us in that sentence. And that just caught the official off guard. Question about why delay the public bid opening a day after the bids are due. That's just simply to avoid providing cover for bidders to hang around and talk among themselves while the bid officials, the RFP officials, are opening the bids and looking at who's going to be the winning bidder. There's a question of what if the lowest bidder doesn't really fulfill the contract. Well, that's a contract issue. It's a performance issue as opposed to an antitrust issue. There may be something else going on, but typically that's just a contract issue. If an illegal activity is cited for bid rigging, what's the first step towards putting the investigation into place? Well, the first step is giving us a call. If you sense there's something, give us a call. Someone suggested that his experience is that anti-competitive rigging also often begins with government officials who design specs and or scoring that favors a particular vendor. In some cases, it could be that. Like I said, in some cases, maybe because people are stretched, you have someone that's there to consult, actually doing the bid specs, and the procurement official is not overseeing their work product. It could be there is a benign reason, or it could be that there's a sinister reason. So again, it's something that we would have to look into. Hold on now. Okay, Aaron, you had a question about my question. I'm not sure which question it is, but why don't you just give me a call? In fact, everyone out there, if there's something I said you don't really understand what I meant by it, give me a call. Okay, Lyndon, the slides are available, and you should have gotten a copy of it. If you didn't get it, by all means, give SPO a call. And you should be able to get the PowerPoint. There should be no problem in getting the PowerPoint. Okay, I think we've gotten most of the questions. Ronnie, do you see any other questions I did not answer?
Yes, there's one that says, are government agencies required to select the lowest bidder?
Typically, when you're going through an RFP, we're out there to select the lowest bidder. But see, that's going to be a function of what's in the RFP in terms of the performance or criteria for evaluation. It may be that you're not going to select the lowest bidder, but you're going to find someone who has a combination of a low bid coupled with excellent performance in the past, great design specifications, good recommendations, and a host of other factors that go into the calculus of who should be the winning bidder. So on something like a standardized product where it's just paper, there's no product differentiation, there's really no issue on quality, it makes sense to go after the lowest price. In contrast, if there's something that really requires a more specialized type of service or product, you may want to consider other factors that go into the determination. Anything else, Ronnie?
Okay, so if you suspect when some backup docs don't seem true, such as the same mileage doesn't add up from one location to the other, but the money being possibly misused and not costs being charged to your approved budget, maybe charged to somebody else's budget. I'm not sure what this.
Okay, on that question, if you're still there on the line, give me a call. That sounds like it's a post-RFP contract performance issue where someone's submitting bogus receipts for reimbursement. That's not so much a procurement issue, it's actually fraud in the government if they're submitting bogus receipts.
Last question I see here is, Is there a list of debarred or questionable contractors or vendors? I believe it's available on DLIR's website, not sure.
You know, I'm not so sure. Does SPO have a list of that sort, Ronnie?
We did at one point, and then I think it was deferred over to Department of Labor. So they might want to check on Department of Labor's website first.
Okay, and I'll make a point to try and find out about that as well. So you can give me a call, whoever posed that question.
Besides complimenting on your training session, that seems to be it.
Okay, everyone, thank you so much for your patience and attention. Thanks for being here. And again, you've got my contact information. Feel free to call me for anything, either as a follow-up to this PowerPoint and the presentation or because you've got a particular circumstance that you want me to be aware of. With that, have a great day. Thank you.
Also, if anybody is attending in a group with one computer, the group attendance forms are available on our website, exactly where you got the PowerPoint. Fill that out, follow the directions, and get that within 1 business day. And send it according to what the instructions are stated on that form. Thank you.